As JFK once said, forgive your enemies, but remember their names. Welcome to Keep It Fictional. I am joined today by the aptly named Sadie, Virginia, and Corinne. And we are here today to celebrate not the names of our enemies, although maybe that will be our existential question. I'll get you all to like really name an enemy. Like I had like Ashley's. I always have like a little bit of like a Ashley's, yeah. Ashley's, Nicole's as well. Even though that is slightly awkward because one of my roommates' name is Nicole, but we call her Lucy, so it all works out. Anyways, we're here today to talk about names. Every once in a while, we get kind of like a curveball challenge here on Keep It Fictional, our podcast for book lovers by book lovers. See, Virginia, I did remember the intro. Give ourselves a little bit like of a challenge that allows us to choose any kind of like genre or format that we might enjoy. And this one, I think, was a little bit, no, actually, I think it was probably difficult for all of us because none of us are named Jennifer. So this week's theme is that we had to find a book, and gosh, I hope I got this right, that the main character shares the same name as us. Is that correct, my book friends? Oh, thank goodness. I had a horrible moment where I was like, was it the author? No. So the character has to share our name. Now, I'd say the three of us have fairly unusual or like out of style names that it was probably a bit of a stretch to be able to find a book for this. So I'm curious, Virginia, how hard was it for you?
Well, I think originally the idea was either like the character or the author, right? And it could be first name and last name, just to knowing our names for three of us in particular. I think Emma was going to be easy, so we were just like that's fine, yeah, right. But for the three of us, we were expanding that, and of course, I have a very obvious one that I could have chosen, but I didn't have to. I actually find one, maybe the only one book that has Virginia as the protagonist, so I got it.
Ooh, I'm very intrigued about that because yeah, you had an obvious easy win for author, but I love that you chose to challenge yourself. Now, Sadie, I believe you've actually talked about the book called Sadie on this podcast before. So how hard was it to find another one?
So this is gonna sound strange. Feel like Sadie is kind of a weird niche name that people like to kind of like throw it in places when they want a unique name, that it's become not as unique as it used to be. There was a resurgence of Sadies when I about like 10, 15 years ago, where I met a whole bunch of babies and little kids named Sadie. Growing up, I knew no one except animals with my name. But I think that it's like coming back enough, or there's like enough, it has like not quite as unique anymore, that there are quite a few books that do have Sadies in them. So it wasn't too difficult. It was just a matter of kind of what I was wanting to read. And yeah.
And I wish I could remember that book because there was one book I think I was telling you, Sadie, that has Sadie and Evie as characters. Both of them. I can't remember which one it is, but yeah. I think definitely you're right. Like I think I see Sadie actually fairly frequently these days in books. So yeah.
But I feel like in like specific genres, like I feel like contemporary literature is going to have a Sadie. I don't know, was there as much like fantasy Sadies out there?
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I don't come across it in fantasy books as much. There is definitely more of a contemporary or old-fashioned name, right? Because like it's definitely an old-fashioned name. So I think that maybe has some historical fiction, but yeah, definitely not as many fantasies.
Yeah, and Virginia, yours is, I'm guessing, mostly historical or contemporary because there's not a lot of like hip, cool warriors saving the kingdom named Virginia.
It's nowhere, I think, pretty much. Like that's the other thing I was gonna be like, if I couldn't find it, I'm just gonna use the name that most people call me by, like, library patrons, which is either Veronica or Vivian. That was my other choices. I was just gonna be like, I'm just gonna say Veronica. And you know what? The patrons would be like, oh yeah, Veronica. I know Veronica. Yep.
Yeah, mine was a struggle. Mine was a real struggle. So I ended up Googling it, and I think there's like one self-published book that has my name with that spelling, but it was far too late to kind of purchase it. And it was like the second book in a fantasy series. And I was like, so I had to get a bit creative with the spelling of it. But I feel like that was within the spirit of the challenge. Because yes, I have funnily enough, the only other Koreans that I've met have been people that I've worked with at libraries. They've both been exactly the same age, same hair color, same height. It's very weird. But the two big libraries that I worked with both had a Korean and who both worked in circulation. Um, Spelled exactly the same. So I am a Korean haunted by Koreans. So it was a challenge, but I definitely did do this. Um, I definitely did it. I did it. So I'm curious for kind of both of you. Do you feel like you suit your name? Do you feel like Sadie, are you a Sadie? Virginia, are you a Virginia?
I think now I do. And I feel bad saying this. I hated my name when I was a kid. I wanted a common name. I wanted to be like an Ashley W or a Nicole R. Like I wanted to have the initial after it, just because that's what you want as a child. You don't want to be unique. So I did not like my name when I was growing up. Now I do. Like now I think that I do suit it. I think that it's very strange to meet other Sadies because I'm like, well, you're not Sadie. I'm Sadie. You're not Sadie. And I think that's because it's a unique enough name that I just don't come across it. Whereas I feel like if you are a Nicole, then you meet a Nicole every day and it's just part of your life. But yeah, no, I think that I do suit it now. I hate the nicknames that come along with it. I'll just say that. If anyone calls me Sade or Sades, I hate it. I hate it. Yeah. My parents and my aunts and one random new friend. But that's the only people that I will even allow say it.
Sades is horrible. Sades is horrible.
I think I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't think I like my name. I don't think I'm a Virginia, whatever that means. Like, I just and I think the other thing also was tricky was I was always a Virginia, even like in Hong Kong, right? Like that was how like even on my birth certificate is Virginia, even though I do have a Chinese name. So everybody called me that. But like I think the way people pronounce the name is like different from like in Hong Kong than in here. So when I have to like I hate having to say my name because nobody ever like especially when I first came to Canada, nobody ever understand what I'm saying. So then like like and then like it's already like annoying enough to have to like like try to understand what people are talking about and like and then like even just your basic things as like saying your name and then they're like oh they can't spell it, they don't understand what you're saying, and then they have like many different and of course it's not a common name so they always think that it's something else and I'm just like and then you have tried to spell it and then like can't pronounce the letters right and then it's just like the most annoying thing. So yeah, it's too long and I don't like it. There you go.
I'm doing some quick counting. Virgi. Oh yeah, that's a lot of letters. That's a lot of letters to handle. Like Sadie, I also hated my name when I was a kid. A lot. A lot. You know, when you go to like the truck stops and they had like the little keychains with that like the most popular names on it, and you're like digging through, you're like, where's mine? Where's mine? It was never there. It was never there. Um, yeah, so I really never liked my name. And it's, I don't say it a lot because I'm the person and people are pointing their finger at me and saying my name. So I sometimes don't clock it. I'm like, who's that? Oh, it's me. It's me. You need me. Who is Corene or Corinne or Corene or whatever you're calling me. There's a multitude of different ways to say it that you just kind of like, as soon as I hear like a k, sound I usually answer to it, which has led to me like picking up several wrong orders at food trucks. Because I'm like, it's close enough. Like, usually no one pronounces it right anyways. So it's like if I hear a k or an een, I'm like, it's probably me. And then I end up with someone else's tacos and I feel like a monster. So yeah, on the subject of names, do you believe in nominative determinism? So that is kind of the
It's too early for this, Corey. But you go.
That's fine. That's fine. I can save this until we're a little bit more awake. I can save it. Don't worry. Maybe I'll keep that as an existential question for the very end. Okay. We are going to embark on this name journey together in various states of awakeness. We're going to start with Sadie. So what's Sadie up?
Okay. So yes, I obviously looked for my first name. I thought about my last name, but then didn't think that that would ever happen. So I went with the first name, and I have read books with Sadie's in them. As Corinne said, I did talk about Courtney Summers' Sadie on the podcast before. One of the books that I was supposed to read for one of the topics a few months ago had a Sadie in it, but it was not that good. So I decided not to talk about it. And I said there is enough books with Sadie that I did have some selection, but I just had to decide what kind of book I wanted to read. And so I eventually went with one that's in a genre that is honestly, it's not a genre that I read a lot, even though it is a YA book. I don't generally read a lot of realistic fiction, even in the YA category, but this sounded kind of fun. It sounded like a lighter read and it had a Sadie protagonist. So I decided to go with it. So this is I Hope This Doesn't Find You by Ann Liang. This is about Sadie Wen. And Sadie Wen is the perfect student. She's school captain, valedictorian, top of her class at the prestigious Woodvale Academy in Australia. It's not easy, but Sadie is determined to keep this social and academic position. Even if it means holding her tongue every time a certain classmate who pays more attention to her outfits and perfect hair asks once again to share her notes, or biting back every horrible retort she wants to say to her academic rival and co-captain Julius Gong, or pulling all-nighters just to finish assignments after spending all day in school and all evening working in her mother's bakery, just so that her older brother can focus on keeping his university scholarship. But Sadie is a people pleaser, and she will do whatever it takes to be liked and stay on the top. She knows firsthand what happens when she disagrees or when she argues. It's what led to her father to leave. And so Sadie does whatever it takes to be perfect. However, everyone knows that you can't maintain a perfect outward persona without just a little bit of behind the scenes ranting. Sadie has her best friend, Abigail, who helps with that. But what Sadie really does to pour out all of her frustrations is write emails. She writes draft upon draft upon draft of emails outlining her frustration, her anger, her resentment towards her classmates and some of her teachers. She, of course, never sends them. She just writes them as a draft and keeps them, telling people what she really thinks about them. At the top of these, excuse me, at the top of these email drafts list is, of course, Julius. His smug attitude, his even more perfect than her persona, and his constant need to outdo her in absolutely everything since they were children. And his stupid, perfect hair that can't actually be as soft in real life as it looks, right? All of these feelings Sadie puts into her emails and then is able to focus once again on being a perfect student and co-captain. That is, until somehow, in the middle of one of her classes, Sadie walks away from her laptop and her drafts get sent. Every last one. The email to her math teacher, who refused to round her grade up by 0.1%. The email to her classmate, who had stolen her science project idea and taken all the credit. And every single email to Julius. Every horrible and sometimes embarrassing thing that Sadie has ever thought about him. Sadie is mortified. In less than a minute, her worst fear has come true. Everybody hates her. And for the first time in her life, she has no idea what to do. To make matters worse, the next day, when the whole senior class is brought in for a special assembly to deal with the issue of her emails, her and Julius get into a screaming match and are brought into the principal's office. The principal's solution, probably figure this out, Sadie and Julius must work together to sort out their differences. If they can focus together on something related to school, then maybe they can sort out whatever bad blood is between them. This begins the hardest thing that Sadie has ever had to do. She has to get along with the person who she has hated for most of her life, while also trying to navigate being despised by pretty much the entire senior class. However, as her and Julius spend more and more time together, Sadie starts to learn that Julius's perfect persona, much like hers, is not exactly the same as what lies beneath it. When the two go to interview a famous alumni novelist who also is a hugely successful lawyer and also happens to be Julius's older brother, Sadie begins to actually feel sympathy for Julius. And as the two co-captains are pushed together in more and more scenarios, Sadie slowly and mortifyingly realizes that this sympathy may be turning into something more. But Julius would never feel that way about her. He hates her, doesn't he? This is a fun book. This is a really fun book. I think that it does have some kind of underlying more serious themes to it. Sadie definitely has some anger things that she's working through. And Julius is going through some quite kind of severe things at home. But I think that on the forefront of it, it's a really kind of light book. It's a really fun book. The back and forth between Sadie and Julius is really fun. And the inevitable kind of rivals to lovers trope worked really well in this story. As I said, both the protagonists have a lot more going on below the surface that first meets the eye. And so it gives room for a lot of character development and maturing as they both start to kind of be truer to the people that they actually are and stop hiding behind their people-pleasing smiles. Sadie's anger at times can definitely be a quite intense, and I don't know if it's done in a truly great way, because I don't think they really necessarily explore the anger all that much, which may have been a bit better kind of for the story. I also found the premise a little bit hard to believe, because if you never wanted emails to be sent, then why would you put the address in the to line? I just don't get it. You could write your drafts, get your frustrations out. You don't have to put the email address in there, and it would just save everything from happening. But once you get past that, the emails being sent out is kind of the catalyst for the rest of the story unraveling. So it does work there. And you really do feel awful for Sadie that all of her private thoughts were sent out, but also a little bit happy that some of the people who probably deserved to be told certain things about the way they treated her actually get told what's real. So that was a good side effect of everything. I'd say that the book definitely has a nice kind of satisfying ending and everything is wrapped up. So if you're looking for something that is just kind of a nice, kind of fun, funny at times, but really kind of touching story about these kind of two people who are very similar and have been struggling through the same thing, kind of finding each other and realizing that they're meant for each other. Then this is a really good one for you. It has been compared to Jenny Han's To All the Boys I've Loved Before, just if they were emails and not love letters. So if you're a fan of that series, or if you do enjoy a good enemies to lovers trope, then I would highly recommend I Hope This Doesn't Find You by Ann Liang.
Put that stuff in a Word document. No, 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 no. Anyways, so how was the experience, Sadie, of reading a book with you as the main character?
it's a little bit strange, but I feel like at some point I just kind of like tune out the name and then just focus on the character as a character and not necessarily the character attached to the name. Like I think that it's when it probably is stranger reading the description of a book and seeing your name like pop up for the first time than actually reading through the whole story and having like every time it's mentioned it. I don't think it was surprising. Um, yeah, and I think maybe I've read enough that it is. I read enough with Sadie that it's not too strange anymore. I think that if my last name popped up, that would be weird. That would be very weird.
So if you were in Sadie's shoes, Sadie, how would this Sadie have been and acted different than that Sadie, other than obviously not putting the recipient in the to field?
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest one. I don't know if I would have been in that situation to begin with. But I can definitely relate to Sadie. In the book, there was when I was in high school, every single week before Spanish class, there was a certain classmate of mine who would come into the library, which is where I hung out before school, and ask like to copy my homework. And yeah, it was very frustrating. And I would not because I wanted to make him happy in any way, but just because by that point I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's gonna come back to bite you in the exam anyway. So this is on you. So I mean, I can definitely relate to like those aspects and like the people pleasing. I'm probably not quite as much as the Sadie in the book. But yeah, no, I would definitely not have put the emails in the email to line. I tend to rant in my head. I don't write my rants down, so I probably just wouldn't have written down anything, and just would have had these rants and conversations in my head. And then, yeah, there's a couple things that I wouldn't like. Her best friend at one point says, well, the way to fix this is obviously to have a gigantic party. And I feel like I was at, no, don't think so. Not going to do anything. People are going to make a mess of my house. They're not going to care about me. And that's, yeah. So I would have made some different choices in that sense as well.
Leave no trace. Leave no trace. All right. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you, Sadie, for introducing us to Book Sadie. And Virginia has also alerted us to the fact that there is is it Squishmallow? Squishmallow? Is it Squishmallow or Squishmallow?
Squishmallow.
A Squishmallow named Sadie. So you know you've really made it when.
And there's also an Evie Squishmallow.
Wow.
Pretty sure there will be Tyler too. So I mean that makes sense. Yeah. So don't look for keychain, just look for a Squishmallow. If you can find it.
But none for us, Virginia. None
No,
for
still
us.
waiting. I'm still waiting.
Could be a while. All right, folks. Let's do this. Again. It's been a rough couple of weeks for me at Keep It Fictional, and I don't think it's necessarily the topics. I think maybe it's me and my picker is off. This one, however, I had extremely limited choices. So I really had to like stretch the spellings of my name. And I was so thrilled when I came up with Corene by Rebecca Morrow. Like, how perfect is this? It's the title. How more could I have fulfilled this assignment? I did it, people. I did it. So it's by Rebecca Morrow, but more on that later. All right. So this book is about Corene. That's going to be real weird for me. So she is kind of growing up in a fundamentalist church that she's always kind of felt like she doesn't belong or is not good enough. Her mother is a convert, so she hasn't been born into the church, and her father is not a real believer. So they get to sit at the back of the church where the righteous people and the good people of this church sit up at the front. And from her position in the back, Corene can see that, oh, it's so weird saying this. Corinne can see that, there are people her own age that are up on the stage reading scriptures. They're helping out with adjusting the microphones. And she notices that they are all boys. All the boys get to help. All the boys get to do the important jobs. All the boys get to be important. But Corinne sits in the back with all the other girls, with all the other people who are just not perfect. Now, one of the peoples, could come up with nominative determinism, but I cannot pluralize this sentence. One person at the front in the tippity top of the pews on the stage is Enoch Miller. And get ready to hear that name a lot because it's going to be repeated in italics at least 3 times a page. So Enoch is a part of the Miller family, and they are perfect. The father is one of the elders of the church. The mother is a perfect homemaker, and their house is always spotless and wonderful. They are true bastions of the church, so much so that when Corinne's father leaves her and the family is about to be kicked out of their home, the Millers take them in and let Corinne's family live in their basement. In close proximity to Enoch, Corinne can only see how perfect and wonderful he is. Oh, his hair so fluffy. Oh, his bod so good. Oh, his words so righteous. And as they spend time together, they don't exactly have conversations, but they do engage in some hanky panky. And he just ignores her afterwards, so that's fine. They become closer, I guess, is maybe the adjective I'm going to use. All of this boiling into like a hormonal mess where they have sex for the first time. Um, he leaves and then tattles on her to the church elders. And then she gets kicked out of the church and her house. Yep. So yeah, this is a real this church does not put the fun in fundamentalist. They are really kind of judgy about outside and worldly things. And so we kind of time skip 13 years in the future where Corinne has kind of made a life for her own. Outside of the church, she's still able to kind of connect with her family a little bit, but she's still on the outside. She feels like she's still missing something or is a little bit tainted by her experience. Even though she's left the church, it hasn't really left her. However, she feels like she has a really good life. She's kind of ditched a really crummy boyfriend. She has a good job that's interesting. She has friends. She goes to see music concerts like Wilco, Ben Folds. That was a blast from the past. Um, and then who should walk into her life again but Enoch Miller. Enoch Miller. Enoch Miller. He is freshly divorced. His girlfriend that he had when he was high school. Oh yeah, I should have mentioned that when he was in high school and kind of hanky-pankying with her in her basement, he also had a girlfriend. It's fine. Um, he is freshly divorced from Shannon and kind of at wit's end when he kind of matches eyes with Corinne across the room and that old spark is there. However, they need to kind of get over the fact that he's still in the church that sees her as some sort of fallen woman or worldly transgressive outsider. Will their love be able to overcome these obstacles? Will Corene be able to find true love? Um, I would argue no. No, she does not. So weirdly, this is the second book in 2 weeks. The second book in a row that is a romance book. I think technically this might also be filed under erotica, but it is the least erotic book I have ever read. Where I do not want the main characters to get together. In fact, I think it's like harmful and it's a bad idea for both of them. So she obviously has a lot of luggage about, what happened. In the book, they literally have sex for the first time, and then he goes upstairs, washes his hands, and tattles on her. She gets kicked out of her house. Never kind of like takes responsibility for that. He's like, "Oh, I was a teenager, and I'm really sorry." Well, you didn't, and what I do like is that the author points out, like, you didn't get any punishment. You were fine. You got welcomed back into the fold for like confessing your sins and kind of putting all the blame on her. So his life got to continue exactly as he wanted it to be, and he got to kind of keep his status in the church. And then he is like a really soft Christian Grey from 50 Shades of Grey, and that he just loves her so much. Just really wants to like be with her all the time. And they're just like two of the least interesting people you could ever hope to meet. Um at first I was like, okay, cool. This is like a Corinne. I can get with this. This is fun. And then I was like, oh, like a hobby would be nice, or like any glimmer of personality or character. Like, I think she's supposed to be sassy. I think that's supposed to be her personality. Couldn't tell. So that's it's really hard to read about two people that you really genuinely at their core, you're like, oh, there's nothing going on there. There's nothing going on. Um, and the writing very much reads like there was that huge trend after kind of like after Twilight came out, more on that later, of like that new adult genre, which is kind of just like very sexy, sexy, sex, YA. And that they still act like teenagers, even though these characters are supposed to be like 30 years old. They are very much like teenagers in the way that they approach everything in their maturity. And the romances are kind of like a little bit contrived and they don't really make any sense and everyone's very sassy. And there's a lot of sex in it, which, you know, if you're looking for that, fine. But oh, it was honestly the most awkward sex scenes I have ever read. Like, my whole body was like shivering in repulsion of how I began to think that maybe people shouldn't do this. I just don't think it's a good idea as described. Um I it's like reading about someone's dental appointments and you're like, I guess, but I guess it's important. But yeah, like if we didn't have to, do we have to? Yeah, I've read things I cannot unread. And I think I might need to take a little break from romance for a little while. Because I'm a little traumatized. So anyways, going back to Twilight and the reason why I think this book kind of has a little bit more traction than your average kind of book in the genre, which again, I'm putting this firmly in new adult, even though they're 30 years old, but they act like they're 14, is that Rebecca Morrow is a pseudonym. And the only information that we get about her is in the back. Rebecca Morrow is a pseudonym for a New York Times best-selling author. There has been no indication of who this actually is, but there has been rife speculation, including several in-depth TikTok conspiracies that this is actually Stephenie Meyer of Twilight fame. In fact, there is a section in this book where she's like, "Oh, maybe I imprinted on Enoch." And I was like, "Hmm? Hmm?" So it is the story of someone leaving like a fundamentalist religion and kind of striking out on their own and figuring themselves out. And so several people have said that perhaps this is Stephenie Meyer. Other names that have been thrown around are Rainbow Rowell, potentially, but I'm going to nix that one because I think Rainbow Rowell's a better writer. Ellen Hildebrand is another one, and I haven't read any Ellen Hildebrand to be able to comment, but I'm also going to say no, I don't think so. Um, I really am so curious to know who is just having the worst sex that has ever happened. Um, because in many ways it felt like whatever this person's was, like, if this book does feel very autobiographical in many ways, and so I just want to, like, sit them down and be like, "Hey, you" um, yeah. So, what I am thankful for is that I didn't listen to this as an audiobook. Because about, like, the second half of it is just like, "Oh, Corene, Corene." I was like, mm, mm, get that out of your mouth. Get it out of your mouth in any context." And so, yeah, I'm really, really thankful that I made that very excellent decision to just read that where I could be like, compartmentalize all of what was happening in my mind and my body into somewhere else. Because again, the love interest, his name is Enoch. Enoch, and she just keeps saying it over and over again. Um, yes. So I did it.
So Enoch or Ralph? Which one are you gonna pick? Have to pick one. Would you rather? That's a would you rather question for you. Enoch or Ralph?
Honestly, this is an easy choice. This is an easy choice for me. It's Enoch. Ralph is a horrible name for a love interest. I'm so sorry for all the Ralphs out there. I hope you find love. I hope you find love. I think it's just like an extra challenge for you. Like, that's tough. Enoch, fine, fine, fine. I'm sure there's some like supernaturally romance out there that has Enoch as a main character because it's got like a very like strong k sound to it. But it was really hard to be in the middle of like this like, oh my God, he's so hot and his body is so great and his name is Enoch. And I was like, can we say that? Right. So so Virginia, um what's book Virginia up to?
I also feel like I guess we don't have to ask you the question about like, what choices would you make? It's like, I think we're just gonna skip that, right, Sadie? I think yeah, I think you're good. Okay, all right. Let me talk about my book then. All right. So yeah, so as I said, Virginia, not a common name, and you're right, absolutely, Corinne. Like I don't know, this is gonna be the weirdest thing because I'm gonna have to say my name a bunch of times in the next like 5 minutes. It's very weird. Yeah, so not a lot of choices. Obvious one, of course, Virginia Woolf, but I didn't have to fall back on it because as I said, I am thrilled, so happy to find that one of the authors that I'm currently like totally obsessed with has a novel with a protagonist named Virginia. So I knew that that was what I'm going to read. I'm going to talk about it today, despite the fact that it is definitely not the type of novel that can be talked about like on a podcast like this, when we're trying to describe like a premise to try to entice you to read the book. So, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because it meets the requirement, and I get to bring up this offer again. So, the book is very hot pink, also very not me. Chandelier by Clarice Lispector, and is translated by Benjamin Moser and Magdalena Edwards from Portuguese into English. So I first read Lispector last year for our Halloween episode, weirdly. I think Sadie was there, and I don't think Corinne, you were there that day. But we had to look for a book about something that terrifies us. And of course, the first thing I came to, because we take this podcast very seriously, is bugs, because I cannot deal with bugs, specifically cockroaches. I grew up with a lot of them in Hong Kong. There are a lot of them everywhere, and the flying kinds are the worst. And so I knew that that was what I was going to have to do, some sort of bugs book. And I discovered that there's a author out there, Clarice Lispector, which I don't know a lot about, has a book called The Passion According to GH, and it has cockroaches in it. So I knew that I had to read it. And despite the itchiness, the constant scratching, the like feeling that something is crawling up my leg, and the many showers that I took, especially in the beginning of that book, I fell completely in love with the book. I fell completely in love with the author. It really changes the way I think about books and novels. And so I went to buy all her books, and I thought that like in 2024, I'm going to read all of them. Well, it's July. I haven't made a lot of progress yet towards this reading goal. But having read The Chandelier for today, I am kind of, like I'm excited again. I'm recommitting myself, and hopefully in the next 5 months, I'll be able to read all her stuff. We shall see. But The Chandelier is her second novel. She wrote it when she was 24. And she basically took the literary world in Brazil by storm with her debut novel Near to the Wild Heart, which earned her not only awards but also the name Hurricane Clarice. And this novel has been translated into English for the first time in 2018. And I have not read enough, as you know, enough Lispector to know to make a very good analysis of how this book is compared to the other ones. But according to the translator Benjamin Moser, who is not just the translator for this book, but of some of her other works, also the author of her biography Why This World, and the editor of the project at the publisher New Directions to translate all her work or to retranslate and publish all her work. So in other words, the expert of all things Lispector said that this is actually her strangest and maybe most difficult book. And I think, other people seem to agree with it. And I mean, just first of all, hats off to the translators, because I think to be able to capture and reproduce that kind of writing style of Clarice Lispector, the sentence structure, the cadence, which everybody commented on it being quite different, and to able to do all that in a different language, I think is just absolutely amazing. And I know all of us here really, really just appreciate and so thankful for translators. You're just like our heroes. Anyway, so Chandelier, as I said, is not a book about plot, but let me try to piece together a plot for you. Oh, here we go. Okay, so Virginia, our protagonist. Okay, so she lives with her family in a big house called Quiet Farm. And it's a house with more rooms than furniture because their family has to keep selling things off to make do. Virginia is one of 3 children, and she's particularly close to her older brother, Daniel. Like, really, really close. Like, beyond a typical sibling relationship. And as far as I know, no, nothing physical happens, but you can tell that the intimacy is way beyond that. So it's strange. It's a very strange relationship. Daniel is not very nice to Virginia. He has often many, many mean things to say to her. He's also has these wild mood swings that make him very unpredictable. But doesn't matter. Virginia's life is basically defined by Daniel. Everything is based on what Daniel says, what Daniel does, what Daniel tells her to do. The two of them decide to move to the city. It's something that they always know that they're going to do. They're going to leave the house and they're going to move to the city. And they move into an apartment together. But very shortly after, Daniel decides to get married. Totally unexpected. And as you may have guessed, that's a wedding that Virginia didn't go to. Now Virginia is all alone in a city that she barely knew, with no family nearby, and without Daniel specifically. How can she go on when a person that dictates everything about her, when a person that truly defines her for all these years has abandoned her? So I probably made this book sound more plot than it actually is already, with just a little bit of what happened. Because sure, there are events, there are dialogue, there are other characters, there are interactions among characters, but in a novel that has absolutely no chapter divisions, with very, very long paragraphs that sometimes seems to go on and on, the bulk of the book is not about the story. It is about Virginia thinking, feeling, watching the external world, experiencing, responding to what's happening outside, but in equal amounts what goes on inside her head and what she creates and what she imagines. And so that's the bulk of it. So it almost feels like whenever there's sentences that talks about the plot, that try to indicate, and it's very confusing too, because I'm trying to be so what is happening? Because everything seems kind of hinted rather than actually happening or describing what's happening. It's almost like those interruptions, just go away, just let me get back into Virginia's head, because that's what I want to be. Which of course makes this book, and perhaps many other books by Lispector, again, I don't know yet, but I feel like it would be way more suitable for readers who are interested in a person's inner landscape and a person's perception of themselves, and that who are just you're trying to always kind of like have like what we do every week, some existential like questions in your mind. Like if that's what you want in a book, then this is totally a good choice for you. If you are somebody who want a story, who want a plot, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be bored. But having said all of that, for a book with so little story, there is so much going on, or feels like there's so much going on. And I think New York Times really described it the best. They said like it's her sentences that began to have a plot. Is with their topsy-turvy structure, they contain the drama and the surprise. And I think that is the perfect way to capture the appeal of her writing and her books. And that's what I love about her. And that's what I fall in love with when I read The Passion, according to GH. I can only speak for myself and my own sort of experience so far reading Lispector. But for me, I think to be a reader for her books, you kind of have to be willing to just like stand there or sit there and just let her writing kind of absorb you. Like you have to be willing to fully give in entirely and just let her do her thing. Her sentences, her words are going to flow by you. If you try to like reach out and try to figure out meanings, you're trying to impose logic on it, you're trying to understand it, it's not going to work. Every now and then, as those sentences go by, some of them will just get stuck to your skin and you'll be like, wow, that sounds so good. That just makes so much sense. And you will find that you see the world differently. But you have to let that just happen to you. You can seek it out. That's kind of how I feel like when I'm reading her book. I know it sounds like weird and mystical but that's just kind of like how I feel when I'm reading her. You just never know. And I started this book earlier this year and I read about 100 pages and I never got a chance to finish it. So for this podcast, I had to restart it from the beginning. And I have already all these post-its on the books, like from the last time I read it. So it was really interesting as I'm reading it again to be like, okay, why did I like post it that line, right? And I'm just like, what? And sometimes I understand, and sometimes I'm like, huh, that's weird. Like, I wonder what about that particular sentence like resonating with me at that time. And I think that goes to, like a lot of like sometimes reading just at the, like I said, at the right time, just random sentences will just really speak to you and really resonate. And I think this is definitely one of those offers that I feel like, for me at least, which I don't do it, like I can probably reread because every single time is a different sort of experience. So I think if you, as I mentioned, I understand not a book for everybody, but I am just so in love with her. If you are interested in just fully immersing yourself in somebody else's mind and heart and soul, if you are more interested in contemplating questions like, when you see a firefly, do you think it appears, or do you see it as more like it disappears? When you are like, if you're interested in like just random questions like that, and if you're always trying to figure like why are we here on this earth, if you're interested in those existential questions, I think you would really enjoy Clarice's work. And I again don't know if this one specifically, I think this might be the one that has like perhaps less plot focus. I don't know about her other stories, but I will find out hopefully by the end of the year, and I would know kind of like where this one stands. But I think this is probably one of her longest novel too, so that makes it interesting. But yeah. Anyway, I hope some of you out there will think that, oh yeah, that maybe I'll give it a try. But give that sounds good to you, if you are just somebody who is okay with all the things that I just talked about. This is The Chandelier by Clarice Lispector.
I like that you described the reading experience as essentially brainwashing. You just sit there and listen, and then over time, some things are so profound that they fundamentally change your life.
Sure, I'm okay with being brainwashed by Clarice Lispector. I'm okay with that. That's fine.
That'd be a great t-shirt. So Virginia, I mean, I wrote down this quote from you because it's maybe my favorite thing that's ever been said on this podcast. There are events. There are events. So I guess this is a bit of a tricky question to ask, but you did say there are events. And other than not being really into your brother, what other choices would you make differently from Book Virginia?
I don't want to give us choices because that's, I think, a strong word for this book in many ways. Yeah. But I think what it is I could totally okay. So this is what it makes me think of. We'll talk about like maybe in the future upcoming episode, we're gonna do one on horoscope, right? Like we're thinking about doing one on star signs. So Emma said to me, what she's gonna do, she's gonna like tell us, okay, well, for our star sign, what are some of the like very stereotypical like kind of traits that we have, right? And so she told me that like, oh yeah, so for Pisces, I'm gonna look for something like delusional because you're all delusional. So she said to me. So I think so in some ways, I feel like that's I can totally see where this Virginia comes in because like I think like she's so in her head. Like at one point she was at a dinner party, and she was just so like I she doesn't know how to deal with these people because they're like city people and then they that she doesn't understand their ways. And so and she also always think that like when you're in a group of people, as she said, like when you're in a group, then you start thinking the same as the group. And so she was just sitting there and she was trying to like look at like, all these people interacting with one another and she just doesn't really know how to get into it. And she feels like she has to behave in a certain way, but that's not her. So in the end, she ended up just like, the first thing that she said to somebody was like, can you pass me the olives? She couldn't think of what to say. But like I can totally see that. I understand like how someone gets stuck in the head and they are just totally in there and they don't like everything else is just yeah. So I just like Sadie said, I understand her. I understand where she's coming from. I think there's also Lispector's books are also very much about kind of like the experience of a woman and sort of especially in a relationship because all of them are pretty much relationship stories and sort of what you sacrifice and what you give or what is expected of you when you're in a relationship. So I think that's also like another thing that I can like kind of identify with in terms of like like how do you retain yourself, how do you try to like still be yourself when you're in a group of people, when you're in a relationship and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I think there's a lot of things that I can kind of like identify with and I yeah. So but it is still very weird to just right seeing that word Virginia like on every other page. So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So as a reading, because I could watch your face when you kept saying, and Virginia, and Virginia, and Virginia. It's weird, isn't it? Too spooky. Too spooky. All right. Well, Sadie, Corene, and Virginia, and our book forms, we bring this podcast to an end with a definition of nominative determinism. Don't think that I've forgotten it. All right. So, nominative determinism is that your name ultimately dictates your profession. And I kind of like extend that over to like your name somewhat determines your personality. So, for example, Ashley's or Jennifer's or Nicole's, they're all kind of, they act a certain way because they are named a Nicole. So, an example of nominative determinism is famously, there's a polar explorer named Daniel Snowman. One of my favorites is they had like an interview on television with a firefighter whose name is Lieutenant Les McBurney. Um, rough. A chiropractor named Mr. McCracken, and a meteorologist named Amy Freeze. So I'm very curious, as we all have last names that have nothing to link with that. But do you believe in nominative determinism?
Do you, Corinne? You should answer first.
Well, my last name is a color, so
And you're wearing that today, so
dun dun dun. Well, on that note, I think we should just accept it that this is a fact of the universe and we cracked it. So thank you so much, everyone. We hope that you are able to find yourself in a book, but maybe not Corene's. Less Corene. Less Corene. So thank you so much.
so
Man, we really crack into the big stuff today.
So with the next episode, or one of the episodes, should it be like reading a book that has I guess one of the other book friends' name? So we can just be like, Sadie did this and Sadie did that. Like, would that be all? I mean, like to find another Virginia is like impossible, but like, do you know what I mean? Like maybe we should do that.
That would be super fun. It'd feel like you're being accused of a number of bananas things for an entire hour. Yeah, I think that would be good for us.
See, I think that would be weirder than saying it myself for some reason. It's just hearing a book friend talk about me, but not about me.
It was weird to feel like I was talking about myself in the third person. Corinne does this, and then Corinne does that. Then Corinne makes some really awful life choices. But I do love that idea. Okay, stay tuned for that one where you watch all of us undergo 2 existential crises in one episode. So thank you so much, everyone, and happy reading.